Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Big Bold You, a show that was created to help each and every one of you out there to play bigger in your life. And in order to do that, you've got to think bigger first. We want to help inspire you to be bolder, which means you are going to have to do things that you don't think you can do, that you're scared of doing, and maybe that they're not even on your radar yet, but you're going to have to do them to level up so you can become the best version of you. I believe that we live in a world where there is a war between good and evil, and the only way evil wins is when good people like you, me, and our loved ones, when we just don't do enough because we don't believe that we can. So every episode, we have an incredible guest that comes on the show, shares their journey, shares their struggles, their ups and downs, what they're passionate about, what their purpose is, to really inspire each and every one of us to do more in this world. So today, I'm so excited to introduce a woman that is near and dear to my heart, somebody that we are truly two peas in a pod because our heart and purpose is self-development. And welcome to the show, Dawnie Dahir. Thank you so much, Dawnie, for being on the show with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I'm telling you, we really are two peas in a pod.
Yes.
I mean, it's kind of like she'll say something, I'm like, yeah, whatever she said, and kind of vice versa. But I know that all of our journeys are special and unique, even though there's some similarities. So before we jump into, what we're going to talk about today, just tell everybody a little bit about who you are, what makes you tick, and how you got to where you are right now in your life.
Well, I am a coach, a holistic life coach, and that was a big step for me to go that direction. I'm a speaker, author, and a writer. And it's just been one of those journeys where sometimes you scared to death to take a step, and yet that's your direction. That's the way I got into the National Speakers Association, scared to death. But I knew that was where I was meant to be. So it's been fun, scary, but because of that, Jens, I have done things I never dreamed of doing. I've written a couple of books, a children's book and a self-development book. I've become a professional speaker. It's just been a wild ride.
Right. It's been a wild ride, but you said it. You did some things you were scared to do.
Scared.
And
yes.
And what made you, what pushed you, because we all need a little bit of pushing, and sometimes we're able to do it ourselves. Sometimes it's a situation, but what was that line in the sand that really motivated you to do some of those things that you were scared to death to do?
What motivated me the most was I felt like I had let fear keep me from moving forward for so long. One day I said, done. I'm done with that.
Right.
And I'm moving forward, and I don't care if I'm scared out of my mind, which happened. But the first thing I did was I joined Toastmasters. And when I went and realized that was my biggest fear, was speaking in public, that there was an organization out there that could help me, I thought, no matter what, I'm doing it.
Right. One of my favorite sayings that I say all the time is success happens in action. You just have to do. And you don't even really know if what you're doing sometimes is exactly the right thing.
Yes.
I was on the phone today with a client, and she said, I can go this way, I can go this route, I can do this, I can do that. And I said, well, you're really not going to know for sure which way is the right way until you get in action and just start moving and doing. And the other thing I say to people is it's usually in that action that what you're really supposed to do, it comes out of that and crystallizes. Yes. So you had gotten to a point in your life where you were probably self-evaluating your life and yourself and saying, hold on a second, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, I wanted to do this. And I'm not doing it because I'm scared. And you said, forget this. I'm going to do it scared, because I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons that we can learn in our lives is you're going to have to do things scared. You're going to
Yes.
have to do things scared, but it's in the doing that you realize, why was I scared?
Yeah.
Why was I scared? So were you in that place in your life where you were self-evaluating where you were, and that's when you said, hold on a second, I'm not going to stay here anymore?
Once I identified the biggest fear that I had, then it got easier.
Right.
Because I could say, oh, speaking in public, or just getting up and speaking in front of a group, or talking to 5 people made me so nervous, except with my family, which is different.
Right.
But that was it. I just got so tired.
Now,
of
what were
it.
you doing before your speaking and writing?
Well, before that, I had been a stay-at-home mom because got pregnant with twins, and then they were born at 7 months.
Hey, listen, no wonder you have a children's book. You spent a lot of time parenting.
Yes. Yes. So because they were born at 7 months, all of a sudden I went from working in a corporation to being a stay-at-home mom overnight.
And that's hard. I mean, it's hard, especially
Yes.
the twins. And that was your first
first.
go round.
Yes.
It's like, honestly, I don't know how you go from no kids to twins. It's a transition, just being a single, and obviously you were married at the time, but no kids to one kids, it's hard enough.
Yes.
So I'm sure when you went to having 2 at a time, you were like, what have I done?
Overwhelmed was it?
Right.
Overwhelmed. But on top of that, because I felt so inadequate as a mother, I felt like I didn't have enough information.
Right.
I didn't have enough experience. Then I was scared to do that, but yet at that point, you go forward.
Right, there's no turning back.
There's no turning back. And raising twins, those first 12 months, that was the hardest job ever had in my life.
Right. And you know what? I think being a mom is a very hard job. I remember my mom saying to me, once you're a mother for the rest of your life. And there is a sense of responsibility. And I never even understood what the term worried sick meant until I became a parent. And then you do get worried sick.
Yes.
And I love it that you were so transparent, that you shared that you felt inadequate, because there isn't, doggone it, there's not a book that really prepares you, although you can prepare with your self-development and you can prepare associating with the right people, but you feel such a sense of responsibility. And I love it that you shared that, because a lot of times there are young mothers out there, and believe me, there are some older mothers out there that they don't feel adequate.
Yes.
And you feel like, oh my gosh, I've got these human beings' lives in my hands, and what if I screw up? Well, I'm going to give you an answer. You are going to screw up.
Exactly.
But you know what? They're going to screw up too, right?
Yes.
So you're there as a single mom. You're not feeling adequate. You're scared to death. There's no turning back. You're doing it. At what point did you have that self-evaluation time where you said, hold on a second, I want to do more?
It was later. It was actually because I had the twins, and then 3 years later, I had a third daughter. They were all girls. And because of their activities, I didn't really get involved in work outside of the house.
Right.
And so it wasn't until they were getting close to graduating from high school that I started looking at myself, thinking, but something had been bugging me for a long time anyway.
Right. And isn't that the
Yes.
case? I mean, that's the case, is when you're not living in congruency. and you're not aligned with what your purpose and your passion and your mission is. There's a void. There's a void in you. And it doesn't mean being a mother isn't the most rewarding job in the world, because it is such a blessing. It doesn't mean if you've got a great job and you're just not feeling fulfilled that you're wasting away. But your calling will nag at you until you start to address it. So you've got this void. Your girls are getting close to graduation. You're starting to look at that self-evaluation. How did you even find Toastmasters?
Well, I found Toastmasters because I was on an airplane on a flight one day, and I was reading the airline magazine, and I saw the word Toastmasters. And I didn't know what it was. And then several months later, I was at the grocery store, and I overheard people talking about Toastmasters. And I thought, weird, I've heard that title before. Well, the third time I heard it, I said, okay, I get it.
Right, you said this is not a coincidence. And isn't that how it happens?
Yes.
Where it's God. I have a friend of mine who calls it God winks, and it's like, okay, it's like, yeah, or tapping you on the shoulder. Okay, hold on a second. Let me tap you again. Let me tap you again, until finally you say, hold on, I think there's some significance
Yes.
here. And so you got involved with that. You're scared out of your mind.
Out of my mind.
But that really led you on a path of self-development.
It did. That's where it really, really started. And actually, it started before then, because I had picked up the book, The Power of Positive Thinking, and it resonated with me so much, I read it 3 times.
I love that. I mean, right after, like you finished it and then you read it?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I'd read it again. And then I actually gave a book report about it. And then I read it again, because I was so hungry for something. I didn't know it was self-development. I just knew I was ready for a change.
Right. And what I love about you is you're very clear with what you value. And I know when I was saying, well, we were talking about just how much fun we were going to have today on the show.
Yes.
I said, more than anything else, we're just going to have a good time. And you chimed in and said, well, good thing, because that's really the number one thing I value is fun. And so this is what's hysterical, is one of the things I say to people is, nothing in life is going to go on forever. Your good times aren't going to go on forever. Your bad times are not going to go on forever. I promise you. I promise you. I promise you. It's not if something tragic is going to happen. It's just when. And it's really how you handle it. So that's why I think laughter truly is your best medicine. You've got to have that a part of who you are. And one of the segments that I love to do on the show is laughter is the best medicine. But I like it when my guests share what makes them laugh. So you've got something really fun to share with us. Any setup, or you want to just roll it first?
Well, I'll tell you how I met this person. I was at my first National Speakers Association conference, and I had signed up to be a helper. Well, I went to the room I thought where I was supposed to be and realized I must be at the wrong room. As I'm standing there trying to figure out, what am I going to do? Where do I go? Who do I contact? Jeannie Robertson walks up to me and invites me to the Tall Women's Breakfast. I had no idea there was such a thing, but she's tall, I'm tall, and so I went to it, and it was so fun.
And listen, was it all tall women?
It was almost all tall women. They allowed somebody short in there.
Now listen, now they wouldn't let you do that now. I mean, it would be too unpolitically correct, but that's hysterical. She is so funny. So let's listen to just a couple minutes of Jeannie Robertson.
All right, the point is to look for the humor around us every day. Left Brain and I wound up in Nanaimo, Canada, about a year ago. We had 5 hours to kill before we took the ferry. We went straight to the Visitors Bureau, and I said, we've got a rental car for 5 more hours. Young woman sitting there, young, these wonderful, smart Elon students here. They know I don't really am talking about them. This was another caliber person here. She's sitting right there. And I said, what would you suggest that we do for 5 hours? And she said, well, pulled out some flyers and some brochures. And she said, oh, I know what. Pointed to the map and said, if you'll go back to the terminal ferry area right down the street and go south for 13 kilometers, you'll come to the Nanaimo River, named after the town. I said, all right. She said, and just go a little further and you'll find the Nanaimo Man-Made Bridge. I said, named after the town and the river. She said, that's right. And if you'll go out there right now, you can bungee jump. Have you ever wanted to take a young person's face in your hands and say lovingly, are you in there? Are you in there? Look at us. Just look at us. Left Brain at that time was 68 years old. Thin, solid white hair, also thin. I was 62 years old, not as thin as I once was, and my hair is Clairol Tweed number 14.
Okay, so one of the things I love about what she does is she calls her husband Left Brain.
Yes.
Left Brain. But, we were talking as well. The thing about the National Speakers Association that I adore is that they really honor and respect men and women of all ages.
Yes.
And I think that's another fear that people have is, my gosh, if you're 30 years old and you haven't made it, you think I'm too old, it's too late. And that's just not the case. I mean, there are people that are well into their 60s and 70s before they even do something. I think Colonel Sanders was 73 years old before he started Kentucky Fried Chicken. So age isn't a determining factor, but there's plenty of people that feel that. They feel that if they're not on the path they're supposed to be on by a certain age, whatever that age, limiting age time bracket that you put on yourself, they think it's too late. So, you got involved in self-development. You got deeper and deeper. How has that played out in your life? I mean, obviously, it's something that you write about, you've spoken about, but who are the people that you enjoy helping, and what is it that you help them do?
The people I enjoy helping are people who recognize that personal development is very important. If you're at a place in your career where you feel like you're stuck, you're not moving forward, you've done everything you can, look at your personal development, because it's like you have professional development and personal development, and they go together. It's not one or the other. So working on both sides, my ideal client is someone who knows that they want to go further into personal development. They know that whatever they think, say, and do creates their reality in the future, and that they're ready to spend money on themselves to make themselves that kind of person they want to be.
Right. And I think it's so important because when people start to spend money on themselves for personal development, that's when you do know you have an awareness.
Yes.
You have an awareness that I am only going to be able to achieve a certain amount of success on my own.
Right.
And that really, to me, it's when you have the awareness. One of the things I do every month, as everybody knows, I facilitate a mastermind, and every month we read a book. And the book that we're reading this month is The Miracle Morning. It's awesome. And he says in here, which is really one of Jim Rohn's greatest teachings, which is our levels of success will rarely exceed our level of personal development. And people need to realize that your ability to succeed professionally is 100% contingent upon how personally developed you are. And I think that's really where, when you get to the point in your life where you are spending money on personal development, even if it's just buying books, to me, that's one of your biggest ROIs, but that's only going to take you so far. Then you start going to seminars, and then that's only going to take you so far. Then you realize, if I meet somebody that can help me take me to the next level, that's really when magic happens.
Yes.
And I'm sure, what are some of your favorite areas to help people unblock?
Well, one of them would have to be speaking in public, because that's the road I have been down. But what it did for me, when I realized that that was my biggest fear and that I had to confront it, then that caused other avenues to open I never dreamed of. I do not have a degree in journalism or English. I have a business degree. I never had this huge desire to be an author, and yet I've written 2 books and I'm collaborating on a 3rd. It's just, once I went down that path, it opened so many doors to something that was, oh, that's interesting. Let's try that. So it's been just a journey, a wonderful journey.
What are some of your biggest lessons that you like to teach people?
Some of my biggest lessons are that don't stop. I have this vision in my mind that I saw on Facebook one day, and it was stairs like this, going up and going higher. And on every level it said failure, failure, failure. And yet the person is climbing, and up here is written success. That stays in my mind, that's what it is. And another thing is, if you will not look at everything you do that doesn't turn out as a failure, you look at it as an experience, you receive something from it, then it's so much easier to keep going because you're not beating up on yourself.
Right. And I think that is such an important lesson. The lesson is that you really never fail. The only time you fail is when you stop. That's the only time you fail. If you keep going, you're learning. And you say that you saw that image, and that image stuck in your mind. There was an image that I saw, and it was just the word fail written out with a big X, and then it said learn. You're not failing, you're learning. You're learning what you like, you're learning what you don't like, you're learning what you're good at, you're learning what you are great at, you're learning what you're not so great at. But it's just, you're learning. And
Yes.
when the second thing you said that I think is so important, it's a very important lesson to learn. And I think sometimes it'll take years for people to really understand it. You can't beat yourself up. You cannot beat yourself up. Listen, I think of the multiple things I've done that, maybe they didn't turn out great, but but I did it. And I think people need to stop beating themselves up. One of the things I do, and I know you are very big into self-assessment as well, but one of the things I do is when something turns out a way that maybe I wasn't expecting, I say to myself, what did I do or not do that contributed to the result? Because I want to know, what can I do or not do to repeat this or to
Yes.
not repeat it? But there's a lesson to be learned. And when you learn to stop beating yourself up, and you learn to commit to finding out what the lesson is, it's a totally different perspective. And I think that's what a coach does, is you put a different perspective on what somebody's going through. And I think that's probably one of the things that you even do when you're writing your books.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about your two books. Let Me Give You a Whisper, which is the children's book. And what's your self-development book that you've got there?
Whispers of Change, Transforming into the Real You.
Now, why? I think this is very interesting, and I know that's very intentional that you have the word whisper in the titles of both of your books.
Yes.
So tell us the meaning for that.
The children's book, how this came about was I was in a very deep meditation, and I received a message to write a children's book. Well, when I came out of that meditation, I was consumed in fear for 4 days. I don't know how to write a children's book, never wrote a book before. Who's going to publish it? Who's going to illustrate it? I had all these questions until one day I said, Dawnie, stop it. Just stop it. Now, let's focus on what you do know. Once I turned that corner, made such a huge difference, because then I said to myself, oh, I like to rhyme, and rhyming comes really easy for me. So I'll start rhyming. That's how I approached it. What do I know how to do? And that allowed me to move forward. Well, when I came across the title, it came from at the time, my 4-year-old grandson, my oldest one at the time, and he would come to me, and instead of saying, I want to whisper in your ear, he would say, let me give you a whisper. There's the title. And that's how the whisper came about. And then from then, my second book, when I went to one of the NSA Tall Women's Breakfasts, one of the people talked to me and said, when you write your second book, which I was in the process of doing, she said, I think you ought to use the word whisper in it. And I said, really? She said, yes, it gives it kind of a mystery. Great. And so then I went from there looking for what would fit in what I want to write about, because what I write about is self-development. So that's where the whisper came about.
But I love it that you had the second person that came up to you and just said whisper. She didn't even know that whisper was in the title of your first book, which title means to me that, again, that's confirmation that the name of this book was exactly what it was supposed to be.
Yes.
And that whisper to me, and you tell me out there while you're watching this, to me, I love that word whisper, because to be able to hear a whisper, you have to be quiet and you have to be still and you have to be listening. And I think that we live in a world right now where, first of all, doggone it, there's so much information. There's so many things being thrown at us at every turnaround that sometimes the really important information we miss.
Yes.
We miss because, and I say this all the time. I love Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective of People. Number one, the first 3 habits are us becoming independent. The last 4 habits are us becoming independent. And that means that you're working with someone, and your highest levels of success in any aspect of your life is in interdependent relationships. But one of those habits is seek to understand first, then to be understood. So to me, that's one of the things that, if you're really paying attention, it's I want to ask questions, and then I want to listen, and I want to be quiet, and I don't want to resist, and I want to learn. So I love that. And I'm sure in each one of these books, you've got some really just important lessons. And that's what I love about reading and about writing also. And I love how you shared that, how you, first of all, you had the negative self-talk, because we all do, okay? But you stopped it, and you just said, stop. Stop the negative self-talk. I'm not going to listen to it anymore. I'm going to get into action. And what you decided to start with was, what can you do? What do you know how to do? And I think that's a lesson in and of itself is, don't beat yourself up for what you can't do. Just start with what you can do, and the right people will come into your life to do the rest.
Exactly.
And that's what I'm sure, who did illustrate the book?
Balboa Press.
Okay, wonderful. So there you go.
Yes.
And you know, another thing I know that you're really big into and you love to help people do is self-healing. You know, talk a little bit about that, because that's transformational.
What got me started on the self-healing path, and this doesn't mean there's something wrong with technology and the medicine you take. Take whatever works for you. But what got me started was I read the book by Louise Hay called You Can Heal Your Life. And that's the first time I had really heard that. I read through it, and I have consistently gone back, looked at it. What can I do different? How can I do something different? I recognize that professional doctors have a lot of information, but I have to look at, what can I do? And then if that doesn't work, then I can go another direction. So I read a lot about healing and what steps I can take, and also what steps I can give other people, help other people with, to see that they have inside of them something that can help them heal. I've heard it said that our bodies know how to heal themselves. Well, it's not just your body. You've got to have your mindset, the words you use, and your action all have to be congruent in order for the healing to take place in my mind. And so it just has been a big part of my life once I recognized that healing comes from within, not so much by something I've taken. And a perfect example of that is Dr. Joe Dispenza. He wrote a book called You Are the Placebo. And that was just eye-opening, that we, because of our beliefs and our thoughts, that we can decide which direction that our health goes.
Right. And you know, what's very interesting is if you when you start to get into this and you start to do research, and there's so much information out there on this topic, but the placebo effect is real. And I believe they said that it's 2/3 of medication. It's all the placebo effect. So if you believe the medication is going to heal you, it's going to heal you. Even they say, even with surgeries, that so many of the surgeries, now obviously there are things that you have to have medical intervention with, but on the other end of the spectrum, you can make yourself sick as well. So
Yes.
you can heal yourself 100%. Our bodies are made to be able to do that. Now, you do need medical intervention at time, but you can also make yourself sick.
Yes.
And you can make yourself sick by hanging out with toxic people, by thinking toxic thoughts, by being open to disease. You know, once you start getting into this self-healing aspect, you have to literally, like you were saying, you have to close your mind to disease. You've got to close your mind. You're not open to it, okay? It's one of those things where you start to get very deliberate in your thinking and your actions. And when you find yourself not being congruent, when you find yourself allowing things to get in that mind, like you were saying, stop, I'm not going to think this way. That's when you start to realize the power that you have. And there's a book, and if you haven't read it yet, there's a book called The Subconscious Speaks. It is a phenomenal book. It was written in the 1930s. And what I love about books that were written back in the day, it's just, it's a lesson for us to know that the rules of the game never change. So the rules of the game are the same as they were yesterday, today, and forever. The rules will always be the same. But in there, he really talks about the power that we have as human beings, and the power that we have to do everything that we need to do. And another thing that you said was your own personal responsibility. I think it's when we take 100% responsibility for where we are in our life, we have the power. When you are complaining or blaming, you're giving the power to somebody else. It's
Yes.
like, if you don't like where you are right now in your life, guess what? You can change it. And that's the self-development and the personal development. And, now, how many years are you into this journey?
At least 15, I'm going to say.
Right, 15 years. And
Yeah,
it
at
hasn't
least.
it just changed your entire life?
Changed my entire life. I was not one of those people who knew what I wanted to do growing up. I went to college, got a degree in general business because I had no idea what I wanted to do. But yet along the way, especially after I started this journey, then I had to be told in a meditation to write a book. But then I completed that, and then I wrote another book. I've become a writer. I have a blog. These are not things I thought of my whole life. These are me going, wow, I get to do something different. Yes.
Right. And talk about meditation, because that's another evolution of personal development, of self-development. Listen, if you're on this journey and you have not started to meditate, you're going to, okay? If you think there's no way in the world I'm going to meditate, just keep reading. You're going to start. But I want to know what your journey has been.
My journey this is how I started meditating. Once I was exposed to it, and I thought, you know what? Let me try this, because that's always my thought. Well, let me just try this. So I sat down. It was quiet in the early morning, and I said, I can clear my mind 3 seconds. I cleared my mind 3 seconds. Okay. The next day I said, I can clear my mind 5 seconds. And that's the way it started. I just kept saying, I can do this. I can do this, until I can sit down generally, unless there's some drama going on in my head. But generally, I can sit down and clear my mind completely. A blank slate. Nothing in there.
Which, isn't that amazing? I mean, so for you don't listen to any music. You're there in silence, and your goal is just to completely clear the mind.
Well, since then, I have found I have an MP3 player, and I have meditations on it.
Right.
And so I listen to those meditations. And that's helpful because I have one, and it'll say, breathe in, breathe out. And it helps me calm myself down. Breathe in, breathe out. And then once I get to that point, then it's so much easier once I get my deep breathing done.
And, I think that everybody's evolution into meditation is obviously going to be different but there's so much information out there on the internet. Just go to YouTube, do a little search. You'll find things that resonate with you, and just try it. Like, that's what I love about your attitude is, well, let me just try it. Let me try it and see what happens. Which in life, that's really what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to have an open mind and try things and see the impact that it makes. And there are so many people that are resistant to things, and I'm sure during your journey, you've met those that are resistant, and all they're saying is they're just not ready right now. And doesn't mean they're not going to be ready maybe later, or maybe they won't be ever, but you can only work with the people that are ready right now.
Right.
So, when you talk about the people that you have impacted in your life throughout your coaching and your writing, what's one or two of your most favorite stories where you just thought, golly, I'm so glad I was there in that person's life?
One of them was someone came to me and said, this is what I want to clear, because I have a clearing meditation that I do that helps people release their old beliefs that are holding them back. And you can feel it. You can feel the release. So it's not just me saying it. They feel it. And I never touch them. It's all just talking in a meditative voice. Well, one of them was a woman came to me and she said, I would like to clear A. And I thought, I'm pretty intuitive, and I thought, that doesn't sound right. So I said, well, tell me what's going on in your life. And she did. And what came around was she had a fear of going big. And I said, that's your fear. And she said, you know what? You're right. So I took her through this process, and she was able to clear the fear of going big.
Yes, and it is 100% is a big fear.
It is.
It's a big fear, and believe me, I think the reason is because when you go big, you're making a commitment, and that commitment that you're making is sometimes bigger than you think you want to make. But here's what happens is when you go big, it's easier. It's actually easier to go bigger than it is to go smaller, because when you go smaller, it takes you longer of a journey, and sometimes during that long journey you will get discouraged and you will quit and stop. But when you play bigger, you're more vested, and you think there's no way I can stop now, because if I stop now, I'll waste all of the time, energy, resources, money that I've jumped into, and you just do it. So that's one of the things I say. One of my strategies is go big or go home.
Yes.
Because truly, if you have skin in the game, you're going to continue. When you don't have as much skin in the game is when you get scared. And
Yes.
one of the things we do every episode is, to the best of our ability, we have an Ask Jen's question. And this Ask Jen's question, I love to answer it, and I also love to have my guest answer it. So we're going to listen to see what Dawnie has to say about it as well. But these are questions that come from my network, from my clients, from my guest network, from my guest clients. And this is actually a question that one of our guests a few weeks ago shared with us, and we didn't have time to address it, so we're going to address it now. And that is, when you have a million things going on, how do you stay focused and organized to get everything done? Well, first and foremost, I want to say that you don't have a million things going on. And my two biggest points here is, number one, proper planning, and number two, prioritize. You've got to plan. I promise you, if you plan your tomorrow before your tomorrow begins, if you plan your week before the week begins, if you plan your month before the month begins, and your year before the year begins, you're going to be able to always be organized, and it makes it easier to prioritize. We can only do so many things in one day, and you got to make sure that what you're doing counts. The last piece of advice I'm going to say on this is, if you've got a vision statement, you always know what to say yes to, and you always know what to say no to. So that's my answer. Let me know how it helps you. What do you think?
Well, my answer is, because when you feel like you have a million things going on, you're overwhelmed. And one thing that I really like to do that gets my energy high is listen to Esther Hicks. When I listen to her on YouTube, she answers so many questions that I have in my mind. One of them was just the same topic. And her suggestion was to take a break, get away from the subject. And so that has resonated with me. So when I get overwhelmed and I feel that overwhelmment, time for me to stop, go outside, take a walk, get my mind off of whatever it was. Because what happens then for me is that when I'm on my walk, I get answers, because I've stopped focusing on what it is, and I'm actually blocking the answer because I'm so irritated and frustrated.
Right.
And so that's one thing I do, is I just start walking outside, get away from it, or maybe I'll go watch a movie or read a book. I do something that gets me out of that atmosphere and into something totally different where I can calm down. And there's another place that I may go meditate that too.
I love it. I love
Yes.
it. Well, those are great words of wisdom. And we are so grateful that you were here today watching and receiving this greatness. Please, if you haven't subscribed to the Jens Johnson YouTube channel, do so. If anything we said today helped you, share the podcast. Let us know what you would like to hear us talk about. And if you're interested in appearing on the show, we'd love to hear that as well. So, Dawnie, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
We had a blast with you. And if somebody is interested in reaching out and learning more, please, we will put in the comment box how you can reach Dawnie. And if you mention that you were on the listened and watched on the podcast, she's going to give you a special offer. So until we meet again, next podcast, be big, be bold, and most importantly, be you. Bye-bye.